Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Legal Paige podcast. Public life in America is definitely grinding to a halt here. All major sports events are shutting down, schools are closing, public gatherings and events are getting canceled, travel is becoming more and more restrictive, and our normal way of life is going to change here for the next few weeks. So first off, I just wanted to give my heartfelt thoughts to anyone out there that has been affected by coronavirus. If you've gotten the virus or you have close family or friends who have been infected, my heart really goes out to you. And if you're in the event industry, it is clearly hitting us super hard. If you're a small business owner, it is hitting you super hard as well. This week has been challenging. It's been stressful. People are in fear, in panic. They, often just feel really paralyzed. They don't know how to act. They don't know best suggestions on how to move forward as a small business owner. So you all, I wanted to sit down with a really good friend of mine and attorney colleague, Caroline Fox. She is a lawyer in the online space as well. She's based out of Virginia, and she's the owner of Engaged Legal. She practices small business and intellectual property law, and she's a resource for the event industry pros and provides templates, education, and articles on all the legal aspects of the wedding and event business. She also loves a good extra hot cappuccino and her Cavalier King Charles Spaniel, Finn. Now, you guys, Caroline and I met last year at Creative at Heart. It's a conference on the East Coast. She is a dear, dear friend of mine. We talk often on the phone. We have questions that come up and we're texting each other, and we've just become really good lawyer colleagues. And it's nice to have a friend that we can chat through these things with. So this episode is really a culmination of everything that Caroline and I have been on tap for this week, the coronavirus and how it's affecting business owners and contracts and insurance policies and cancellations and rescheduling and financial situations of business owners. Those are all the questions that we have been answering nonstop this week. And I was like, hey, Caroline, do you want to jump on and just kind of do a popcorn style, like, what's going on? Like, what are your take on this? Like, what do you suggest regarding this situation? And she was totally down for it. So this is a really special episode where you guys get to kind of be flies on the wall and listen to Caroline and I talk about force majeure and cancellations and rescheduling and what to do with your contract. Do you need termination agreements if you're going to, cancel your wedding contracts with people? Do you need rescheduling contracts, and what's going to happen to that retainer? Is it going to be on credit for how long? What mutual agreement are you making with your clients? And then of course we kind of dive into insurance policies, what you can do, who you can reach out to regarding your insurance policies. And at the end, we really sum it up with financial implications of the coronavirus and the economy right now as small business owners, kind of best practices moving forward. So I really hope you enjoy this episode. And without further ado, let's get to it. You're listening to the Legal Paige podcast, where we chat about life and business with a legal twist. I'm Paige, attorney and photographer helping online businesses and creatives tackle their business dreams without breaking out in hives. No more legal mumbo jumbo. This podcast features simple, bite-sized advice that'll have you legally legit in no time. Are you ready? Let's get started. As a reminder, before we get into this episode, I am legally obligated to give my disclaimer. So I am an attorney, but I am not your attorney. All legal information I talk about on this episode is intended for the masses and a large variety of different businesses. I am only your attorney when you hire me and we sign an engagement letter for me to work specifically on your legal issues. Please feel free to seek out another attorney in your hometown if you need specific legal advice or contact me for more information. Alrighty, here's the episode, friends. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to chat through this with you because I know that we've been exchanging some text messages and just trying to figure out how to help people.
Yeah. You guys, it's been really interesting too, from a lawyer perspective. I feel like kind of lawyers are on tap this week. And as Caroline said, we've been talking back and forth via text, and I have been on the phone with other attorneys as well, kind of going over like what's happening with contracts and cancellations and rescheduling situations. So Caroline, before we kind of get into this, I want you to introduce yourself to people. Who are you? What do you do? And yeah, just give a little background on yourself.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm a lawyer too. I have a law practice in Virginia. We do small business and sort of in that creative space, IP heavy small businesses is what I tend to tell people. So work with a lot of event professionals. Got my start in the wedding industry because I started my law practice when I was 25, I think. I came back from New York to Virginia to start my law practice. I was working in the music industry and advertising industry. And just that's kind of where I got my start. Wedding people, it was kind of starting to explode. So started really helping in that area. And it's kind of been our practice ever since. We're probably 90% creative business clients, or with some sort of tech, creative or tech. Every once in a while, we have somebody who's just kind of like a little bit outside our normal zone. But I'm sure you can agree. Once you kind of start in one area, you kind of niche down. You're like, oh, these are my people. So that's what we did. I also have a couple years ago, I guess it was 2 years ago now, I started the Engage Legal Collective, which is a education resource, template shop, blog, that whole thing for just event industry folks. So those are my two jobs, my day job and I guess my side hustle.
Don't we all have that, especially everyone tuning in today? So you guys, Caroline and I, we met at Creative at Heart. It's a conference over on the East Coast, and we've just stayed really good friends for the past year. We were planning on going to a couple of conferences here together in the next couple of weeks, but those have obviously been canceled. So we're a little saddened, but of course it's good that we can come together and really collectively talk about these issues that are facing small business owners right now, since Caroline and I really speak to very similar niches of business owners. So Caroline, I kind of just want to start with, let's just go into it here. The big question regarding force majeure. Right. So some contracts that people have. And the first thing I want to say, you guys, is we're looking at existing contracts right now. There's not really much you can do with your existing contracts in their current state. I think it's the letter and the four corners of what your existing contract with your clients is, like how it's written. And if you have a force majeure clause, that is where it usually deals specifically with how parties' kind of obligations are affected by an event like this that affects one of the parties' abilities to perform. And it's, force majeure is kind of like changing the world right now. Yeah. And how, what is your first thoughts on these force majeure clauses? Like everything that's been coming in from clients this week and from people online, where do you think force majeure clauses sit in the current state of the world?
Yeah, sure. And I think this is the way you phrase it's really interesting too, because it's like the first thought I had was like, oh shoot, of course this will kick in. But then honestly, when you step back and look at it from actually the right answer is we're not quite there yet. Mm-hmm. Like we're not in a force majeure situation. Nowhere. I mean, there are a few localities who have shut down gatherings, but really what force majeure requires is, it has to be almost impossible due to one of these mentioned reasons. And yep. You and I have kind of have similar thoughts on this. We're not there yet. And a lot of force majeure clauses have things like government insurrection or government mandate or other acts of God. And there is debate whether this kind of pandemic situation, if governments close, make us all quarantine and all that, like that, I think would fall under government mandate for sure.
Yeah, I do too. I think the issue here, of course, is people's existing contracts. The force majeure clauses don't state epidemics or pandemics, right?
Right.
I think people are going to add those in. I think that's a big lesson for everyone and what you and I are kind of pushing people to do. But there's nothing you can do with existing contracts, you guys. That's kind of why I stated that to begin with. And so what Caroline is saying is, okay, so, but most contracts have, kind of government mandates, government orders. So a lot of the things that are happening right now, and it's very fact specific, very circumstantial, and very location specific. Like, where are you? What government orders have been issued? And how does that affect your performance? I think that's ultimately how you're going to read these force majeure clauses. Do you agree?
100%. I mean, it's so fact specific. It's so contract specific even. And I've had people ask questions about, can I just have my client sign a new contract? And the answer to that is probably not. I mean, unless you're going to throw a lot of deal sweeteners in there and provide, and I don't know if you've talked about what consideration means. Mm-hmm. You're probably stuck with that contract for that client. And I've also told people, don't kick yourself for not including something about pandemics, because this is not something we've had to deal with before. This is not.
Yeah, there's no way we could have foreseen this. Just that's why a force majeure clause is there. I mean, we try to protect ourselves with all of these different clauses in our contract, but at the end of the day, things like this happen and you have to go back. I think you and I are okay, this is why contracts are so important, you guys. And people are really starting to take note of that. But
thank God.
Thank goodness. So I think as a whole, right? And if we're looking to the majority of situations as they stand right now, we are recording this on March 14th, 2020.
Pi Day.
Pi Day, everybody, 3/14. Force majeure just really isn't fully applicable. But caveat here, obviously, it could be applicable in various situations. And I've talked about this, two different scenarios. Okay. You're quarantined. If you're quarantined, your clients are quarantined, or they've, touched or been in close contact with people with COVID-19, I think that is a force majeure situation. Okay. But even if it's a force majeure situation, and Caroline, let's talk about this in a sec, then there's certain things you got to do. It doesn't just mean force majeure, what does that mean? Right? People don't really know. And I think another thing is, even if, you're not travel restricted or quarantined or government orders haven't been put in place, there was a really interesting kind of comment thread on a Facebook group where someone said, this was a photographer in particular, she said her mother, the bride's mother, was from China, and the bride's mother couldn't get to the United States in the 2-week span. She had a wedding in 2 weeks. They need to postpone the wedding. I would say on, force majeure clauses, you guys, as well, should be very two-sided here. It should be either party if performance or, contractual obligations get hindered by some unpredictable, unforeseeable, impossible situation. And I think that would kick in there as well for the client in particular. All right. So say it is a force majeure. We're saying, majority of situations, it's probably not fully impossible to perform your obligations. If you can somehow get to the location or event, and you guys were talking mainly here as the event industry, a lot of people can still perform and are willing to perform, voluntarily willing, you guys. I know a lot of you can't for various reasons. I think that kicks in kind of another part of your contract, and we can kind of talk about cancellations here on parts of the service provider. But okay, so say it's a force majeure situation. I have been really trying to discuss with people what mitigation is and how you kind of have this duty to cure your performance, even if a force majeure event arises. So can you kind of talk about that from your perspective?
Sure. I think I get what you're asking. If in a situation where we are stuck, we can't do anything, actually cannot perform our obligations. You can't just be sorry, we're stuck. We're going to just continue to sit and keep all of this stuff that we ordered for this event, or maybe maybe it's not a wedding, but it's a large event where you brought in a bunch of shipments of stuff. You can't just be like, oh, we're just going to sit here and hang out with all of our stuff that we got. Or you have to really try to help fix the situation. So you don't want to just sit on your laurels and just be like, throw your hands up in there and be like, oh, well, we're done. You do need to show good faith and try and help the situation by canceling orders, sending stuff back. Maybe you're a florist and you have a big order of flowers coming in, but you can cancel them. You can say, no, we don't want this shipment coming in. We have 2 weeks. If you need to be canceling them, because you can't just be like, oh no, you ordered all these flowers for us. Sucks for you. Now you have to pay for it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are also, even if your contract does say, and this is where I've been kind of trying to walk a line with some people, it's even if your contract does say, oh, this is not, you can't cancel, you can't do this. We also kind of get into this like business, legal, PR triangle of, maybe you have legal rights to do something, but do you want to also don't be a jerk, like be a human, and work with everybody. So, and I think that is where the small business situation, like some businesses are going to be okay and some aren't, where the ones that are trying to work through the situations and help clients are going to be the ones that end up coming out on top. I get if you can't refund everybody's money right away. Like people are depending on money coming in and non-refundable deposits and things of that nature. But can you reschedule? Can you adjust orderings? Can you cancel certain things and limit the amount of money your clients are going to incur, like the expenses are going to incur? How can you make that less? Because especially in an industry based on making things easy and making things pretty and making things seamless and natural, you want to be able to provide that service to your client, even in a time like this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's ultimately what they're doing, right? They're toying this like legal line and this like ethical, moral integrity line. They're trying to be business owners. They're trying to be human beings. I think you're saying, of course, don't be a jerk, but also like read your contract, figure out what your force majeure clause says, figure out if you're in, lots of you have heard me talking about this, are we in force majeure land with your specific situation? I think it's case by case basis with every different event and every different client situation. And if you're not in force majeure land, I think you're still in cancellation and rescheduling land. Yep. And then the one, and we'll get to that in a second. The one other thing I really wanted to point out, you guys, is if you don't have a force majeure clause, I've had a couple people tell me like their contracts don't have it, and that's okay. Like it's okay. Like I'm trying to calm anxiety here. There is still kind of a contract doctrine that kicks in. It's called frustration. And it's like a common law doctrine. If you don't, a force majeure clause essentially kind of lists out what you have decided to contractually obligate if something were to be frustrated under the contract. So it's like supersedes this doctrine is what I'm trying to say. But this doctrine really provides that if a party can be discharged from its contractual obligations in the absence of any type of force majeure clause, but still it's more of a narrow interpretation of the contract. So it has to literally be physically and commercially impossible for you to perform the contract or render service. And again, I think it's a lot more narrow in terms of if you don't have a force majeure clause. So I want everyone out there to know, like, there are things in place that can still help you if your contract isn't up to snuff with what you think it should say. Now, kind of aside from that, I'm not obviously going to get into like the deep holes of my legal research here on frustration of purpose and impossibility and force majeure, and people's heads are probably spinning right now. Okay, so let's say it's still possible for you as a service provider to perform your services. You're willing to, you're able to, you're going to take whatever necessary precautions you need to in terms of your health and your wellness and, maybe your assistant's wellness if they're coming to an event with you. You're going to wear, mask, gloves, hand sanitizer up the wazoo, those type of things. And you're still going to perform, but your clients want to cancel or reschedule or postpone the event for various reasons, but we're not in force majeure land. So obviously, first step for people, look at your cancellation and rescheduling policies under your contracts. I think best practice here, Caroline, and you can kind of tail on with what I say. I suggest you, of course, want to be proactive with your communications with your clients from the get-go, kind of explain in a notice email of your current position as a service provider, kind of open up the conversation to people that may have events. I'm kind of talking to a lot of you photographers out there, videographers out there who maybe have events lined up for the next 2 months every weekend. I would say open up the conversation, kind of give them relief, knowing that you're here for them and just see what their thoughts are. But people are asking me, when should you bring up your contracts cancellation and rescheduling policies? And then what happens if, and we can really kind of start refining this here, Caroline. Okay, so say you do that and then your clients are like, yeah, we want to reschedule, but you have the words non-refundable retainer in your contract. Like, what should you do, or what are best practices? Or like, I'm telling people kind of legal risks and liability wise in the future, this is what I would suggest. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to, backing up. I'm going to back up because I'm getting excited. So first off, you have to look at your contract and see what that non-refundable retainer clause looks like. Is it in Virginia? We have to be really, really careful about the way they're worded. Do you explain these are liquidated damages and not a penalty? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so you need to make sure that that's there, first of all, and that it's very clear that it's non-refundable and exactly what is non-refundable.
Yeah.
So if you have that, then let's move on to step 2. This whole thing is a Plinko chart, by the way, just in case you guys haven't noticed. You drop something in at the top and just kind of watch where it goes down and bounces off of and where it lands.
Yeah, true. Add in a little integrity, moral, ethical things at the end, and then you'll figure out what's going to be the best position.
Exactly. So, and then the targets are constantly moving, so that's fun too. But so anyway, you need to look at that, and then I have been telling people you have your legal answer and then you have your small bit, your business answer. So you can take into account, we can tell you what legal implications will happen and what your right is under a contract, because rights and actual execution are 2 very different things. So your rights under your contract may say you postpone, it's non-refundable for any reason, and you owe us an additional non-refundable deposit. A lot of times I'll write contracts like that, especially for my events people, because things move around a lot. Weddings get rescheduled, that kind of thing. You may have in your contract, if you cancel and we're 30 days out, we keep everything and you still owe us X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have all these terms in your contract. You're right, as long as we're not in a force majeure situation and as long as it's all written correctly. Your right would be, okay, we can keep it. This is how we roll. But let's think about what that looks like from the outside. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting in the weeds, and I think I'm even getting away from your question, because at this point I'm not even sure that I'm answering it. But I think that you just really have to take a look at every specific situation. It's not an easy answer. And I think people are looking for an answer like, what should I do? Tell me exactly what to do. What's my roadmap? And honestly, there really isn't one. Mm-hmm. You need to look at every situation. How can you offer them something in the future and maybe not need a deposit? Like maybe you apply that deposit in the future. Maybe there's a situation where you're like, okay, well, we know that the event's not going to be what you want it to. Maybe your mom is stuck in China and you really want her to be there, that kind of thing. We'll let you reschedule. Here are the available dates. And then if we can't figure it out, then we'll talk about it. Then we'll talk about next steps. Whether those next steps are you just keeping the refundable the non-refundable retainer, whether it's keeping half, whatever, that's going to kind of be based on your business, what you can afford, what, you think is right at your core, honestly, because there is a lot of, with small business, you have a lot of discretion. And I think one of the things that this is reinforcing to everybody is that, especially coming out of a good stretch of time with a good stock market, great, low risk kind of thing, like owning a business is a risk. It is a risk. And it's not always easy and things are not always going to be good, but that's why we kind of plan in advance. We put money away. We try and insulate ourselves and save for the times when it is not so great. But it is going to be based on your insides.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I think if you're not in force majeure land and you're still in cancellation, rescheduling situations, you really do kind of have to look at your contract. I say always kind of point your clients to those clauses, what they mean in layperson terms, really explain that. You guys document everything. You need to be emailing back and forth. Email is fine for documentation purposes. Just please try to avoid right now, like hopping on the phone with your clients and then just like, it's going to turn into like a he said, she said situation down the line. So document things. And like what Caroline's saying, offer options. I think rescheduling, I've been really counseling people right now on rescheduling options. And because this is a very, very unpredictable, unknown national circumstance,
right?
Where does your business fit into that in terms of, can you offer credit on people's accounts for, I'm kind of stating right now, like 6 months out, I think we're still like not sure. I think that's kind of risky. Like we don't know what 6 months out looks like. And I don't know if people are going to be able to reschedule events in 6 months. They're kind of booked up, but maybe have, a 12-month period of crediting that non-refundable retainer. I think a lot of people use the words non-refundable retainer. If you use the word non-transferable retainer as well, non-transferable, reservation fee, whatever you call it, then you can kind of be the hero in this situation and say, well, it's still non-refundable, but I'm going to actually allow it to be transferred as credit for another, event, services that I can perform within X period of time. But you really do have to kind of lay out then. And again, like you said, you're just trying to come to some mutual agreement with your clients. What is going to be the best case scenario for both parties? And can you get to that solution? And if you can't, that's kind of where you go back to, all right, well, my contract says non-refundable. You're either going to stick to that and you're going to keep it completely non-refundable, depending on your financial situation and your morals and your ethics involved in that. And kind of risks and liabilities. I know you and I do this all day long. Like risk assessment is our job.
Right.
But I always tell people, you got to kind of put that risk assessment hat on, because if your clients seem like litigious people or they have like a huge network of people that they can word of mouth you to, best business practices at that point might be refunding at least a portion of the retainer if you can document at least that you had XYZ services have been rendered. So I believe that I am entitled to keep this amount, but maybe refund the rest. So it still like looks good in your favor. There's so many ways to navigate this, you guys. And there's so many options for small business owners. Like Caroline said, it's super discretionary, but you really have to look out for what's going to be the best for me. Am I going to lose out on a bunch of money? I think right now, what people are realizing is it's going to be very difficult for you. People have that like 30-day, like you were talking about. You have to give notice within 30 days if you want to cancel or reschedule, or you have to, you forfeit the entire fee, right? Because lots of times payments are due 30 days before. Well, I have been on the phone with a couple clients and they're saying, my clients haven't paid yet. And their event, for the 50% remainder due on their account because of the coronavirus. And they their event is say 3 weeks out. What do I do? And I'm like, I think it's going to be really challenging for you to get that remainder. But I think what you're looking at right now is what are you going to do with the retainer? What are you going to do with those funds that they have already paid, and kind of open up that discussion with clients. So I think we're kind of beating that to a dead horse here. Hey everyone, Paige here. So if you're listening to this episode and you're like, Paige, I am in a cancellation situation with a client. I think I need to sign some type of cancellation contract and get that in writing. Don't worry, friend, I got you. We have created a cancellation contract and a rescheduling contract bundle that you can purchase today at a discounted rate, heavily discounted rate, to ensure that you guys have a written contract in place with your clients if you decide to cancel your services altogether, or you decide to keep that retainer as credit and transfer it, and kind of reschedule the event. It's 2 different contracts. You can get them in one fell swoop. I want to make sure you're protected. It is imperative at this time, if you are in cancellation or rescheduling situations, that you get all of that documented on paper and you sign agreements with your clients. So you guys can get those at thelegalpageshop.com. Again, thelegalpageshop.com. And this bundle is discounted this week. What I'm thinking is, what happens if you do cancel or reschedule, and what type of contract do you need in place? I think people kind of are missing this link here. Okay, you document everything via email, but should you probably sign a cancellation contract or rescheduling contract? What are your thoughts on that?
We're on the same wavelength here, because I was literally just going to be like, and then once you decide what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. I think people forget there's another contract and agreement that comes into play here.
Yeah. So what I have been telling people, and what we've been working on, is you can't, most people's contracts, if they've got a solid contract in place, say that this contract can't be modified unless it's in writing, right? Mm-hmm. It's a great idea for a lot of reasons to have that in your contracts. So that means if you're going to change anything, y'all got to agree to it and put it in writing so we can actually change that contract. So what you need to do is, even if we have emails back and forth, we could talk about if that's in writing or not, but I'd rather not even deal with worrying about it. So what makes the most sense is to essentially write that contract that says, hey, we had an agreement that we signed on this date. It said we were going to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Because of extraneous circumstances that we have not dealt with before, we are both agreeing to modify our contract. Mm-hmm. Here is what we agree to. And then just make it as clear as day, as clear as you can make it. And then just have both of you sign it. And that way you can rock and roll. Honestly, I want to get your thoughts on this, because I don't know my thoughts yet. So I'm not quite sure what my thoughts are. So I need yours. I am usually really okay with e-signatures, right? Because they're allowed by statute. We're usually good with e-signatures in almost every situation. Here, though, I don't know. I feel like people might, with panic and with people freaking out, I almost want to encourage people to get written signatures if you don't have a e-signature tracing situation. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I thought you were going to ask me a different question, but this is very interesting.
Hard left here.
Hard left. Yeah, I think that's actually probably a good call. The reason being, you guys, is what Caroline is saying is, even if you send things through your CRM systems, it's actually really challenging to trace if that actually came from the person who was supposed to sign on the dotted line. So lots of times you can just send the signature link in email, and it could be anyone that clicks on that link to sign. So that's what she's getting at here. That's the issue. I think you're right, especially if you're going to sign on to, and I kind of want to delve into this a little bit more, my thoughts on cancellation contracts and rescheduling contracts. But yeah, I think a written signature is probably a good call in this in this situation, especially since you're modifying things so significantly.
Right.
And it's very fact specific and probably like client specific. So I think written signatures would be fine. And you guys, there's really easy ways to go about that. You can have your clients print, they can sign, then they can upload, there's all kinds of scanners on your smartphones, those type of scanner apps, and you can send them. Written signature is probably a really good idea here. I don't know. I feel like that would be so much
overkill.
Like, I'm just thinking here, that's a lot to argue. You'd have to have insanely litigious clients that you're working with to get to that point, because they would not only have to they would have to argue the validity of your termination agreement based upon the signature, not upon like clauses in the contract. So thinking from a contract lawyer standpoint, gosh, that would be like defense number 10 in your briefing. But I think you're right.
But it's also an okay one. I mean,
it's legit. It would invalidate the entire contract. So I think you're right there. I think that's a consideration for people to make. And I think that at that point, if you're really concerned about it, that's probably a good time to talk to an attorney right now. If you're concerned about electronic signatures. I do know the main thing here is if you have 2 clients on board, like make sure you have both clients sign on to these termination agreements.
For sure.
People are asking me that. And then just delving a little bit more into these contracts, I've really taken the approach this week for kind of, it's a twofold. Are you signing on to a cancellation contract, or are you signing on to a rescheduling contract? And I like, many of the people that I work with, I've niched down, you've niched down more in the event industry world, and work with a lot of like conference and event organizers. I work with a lot of photographers and videographers. And so they are like, well, we're either going to cancel the event as a whole. I'm keeping the non-refundable retainer, but they're not obligated to pay anything else on the contract. I'm not obligated to perform. What do I do?
Yeah.
I think that's a straight up cancellation agreement, termination agreement. I think at that point, you don't just like modify your contract. You're signing a different one that explains kind of the scope of the cancellation. They're forfeiting the retainer or the reservation fee. You have a release of contractual obligations and performance. And then a few things that I want you guys to consider when you're writing these things. This is very lawyer speak here, so bear with me. But mutual release of claims under that kind of thing is you would generally see that in a termination agreement. So you are releasing, any claims against your clients and vice versa, which is good. Like that's a good thing to agree to. Kind of representations and warranties. I think confidentiality is a really good clause to put in these type of agreements, because as Caroline and I have stated various times throughout this episode, it's so case by case specific. And so you don't want one client, just stating what you guys have confidentially agreed to, like out in the open. And then all of your other clients are like, well, you did this with this person. If you sign termination agreements, and this is across the board with like all types of commercial contracts, a confidentiality clause for terminating different contracts is usually in place. So I would make sure you put something like that in there. And then of course, like Caroline's saying, you want all of those really important legal phrases that it's, terminating the agreement. This is the previous contract you signed on to on X date, and you are void, that contract is void. It is superseded by this termination contract. So that's the cancellation contract, but I think it's also important to have in place like a rescheduling contract. And that either, and this is twofold too. So I think you can do it one of two ways. Like you said, you can kind of modify through written words, of course, because lots of the contracts say, it can't be modified without written consent of both parties. So you can modify a contract or amend it. But I think a lot of people in my kind of niche, the photographer world, they want to just transfer the retainer, but they want to still cancel the contract because even if you're rescheduling, oftentimes people have updated pricing. So say somebody wants to reschedule a wedding that was supposed to be for next Saturday. And then they want to reschedule for like the end of 2020 or even the beginning of 2021.
Or October 2020, where everything's everything's booked up.
you seriously like hit the nail on the head there. Like, yeah, I just talked to someone yesterday and they're like, my fall is full. So I'm booked on like a Friday and a Sunday. And if they want that Saturday, like my pricing is going to be exponentially higher than what it usually is. And you have the discretion to change your pricing, for those reasons. I think people want to, of course, add the retainer on as credit on people's account, cancel the previous contract, but then say in their rescheduling contract, kind of the scope of the rescheduling involves them informing the company within X period of time, maybe within 6 months of when they're going to reschedule the event. You kind of have to come to a mutual resolution on when that date is, make sure that the company is available to perform services. And then, of course, you have to sign on to a new contract at updated pricing at that point. So really, you guys, that retainer is just merely credit on your account. It's kind of what airlines are doing right now.
Yes.
They're like, you can... cancel, like no cancellation fee, and we'll just give you, like, we'll issue a credit. But we all know, and it's so easy for us to kind of wrap our heads around that. We're like, oh yeah, but like pricing might be different in 2 months when we look at scheduling that one flight, but at least I still have this credit. So that's kind of how that would work. But I still think you need to, oftentimes, I would say in a majority of circumstances, regardless of if you're canceling or rescheduling at this point, I still think in most cases, you are terminating the original agreement. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simpler. I think it's honestly just simpler to cancel the original agreement and then just go out under a new one. If you just, because that way you're not, I think it's just simpler. I agree. I'm just going to say, yep.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I've really been kind of diving into this here with so many different contracts I've looked at and just thinking about, okay, people's existing contracts probably aren't the best right now anyway. And people are like, okay, there's a billion things I need to add to my contract, kind of beef it up and protect myself as a company and also kind of protect my clients in certain situations. So that's a really good procedure and workflow to get to a new contract. So that's why I kind of think it's easier to, Caroline, I don't think we need to talk about insurance really. I think that is so dependent on kind of the insurance policy. People have been asking those questions. I don't know if you just have some general thoughts on that. I know a lot of policies just are not getting invoked. Like there's exclusions and there's no way you're going to get that money. I think insurance policies would literally go under in a day if they allowed insurance to cover it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that? What would you suggest? I know you've talked about insurance a little bit more than I have, so I kind of wanted you to take the floor on that question.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I actually have notes on these still like sitting on my desktop. So what I'm seeing is that your standard event cancellation insurance is going to typically cover stuff beyond your control. But that again, it's going to be really dependent on the policy. And we don't know if we're there yet because we're not in quarantine mode. I think that if it was for event insurance, and that's if your clients have gotten event insurance, which I always advocate that you get named as, if you're an event professional and you have your clients get event insurance, I advocate that you are named in that insurance policy as an additional insured, because from my understanding and working with all of, my event insurance girl, that will help you get like paid directly essentially instead of them getting paid first and then having to pay you and like just be another layer. Anyway, so from what I see, it looks like it's very policy specific. If you are looking at getting any sort of policies from today on, like if you are like trying to encourage clients that maybe have future events to get insurance coverage, they're carving out COVID from those policies. So, for example, if it is travel insurance, you can go to a good example is Hotwire, because I just looked at it because I had something canceled and it's not refundable. And they have carved out COVID from their insurance policies. So that means they're excluding it and it's not going to cover it. So some event insurance policies previously issued may have that in there. They may have, they may have all cause or epidemic coverage. However, moving forward, I'm pretty certain that they're going to be carving out COVID from all that, because just like you said, they would end up going under. If there is any sort of epidemic, communicable disease coverage in a previous insurance policy, you're probably okay, but don't tell all your people to go out and get event insurance coverage because they'll get covered, because it's probably not going to be covered moving forward. So without those kind of existing either in your policies now, in their policies now, or if they don't have any sort of like extenuating epidemic. Why do I keep saying epidemic? It's very strange. Epidemic riders in there, they're probably not covered, which kind of sucks. So just look at exclusions, read those exclusion policies. And I will be 100% honest, and I am not ashamed to admit this. Insurance is so confusing. I have to go to my insurance girl and be like, can you please help me understand what this means? Because, and I think that this is a huge problem, and I'll get up on my soapbox for just a second, but if there's a situation where I don't understand what insurance means, I also have my significant other is a dentist, so he knows medical terminology. If we're both looking at an insurance policy and we don't understand what medical stuff's provided and what, if coronavirus counts or whatever, we both went to a lot of school to understand those kind of things. So what the heck? How are normal people that haven't gone to extra education supposed to understand this? So don't kick yourself and be like, I don't understand. I feel stupid. Don't feel stupid. It's very complicated, and they make it that way for a reason.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you guys, I was actually in the insurance defense world for a while. And then when I was clerking for a federal judge, I ended up kind of being the insurance law clerk guru, because I knew. Oh my
God.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking I would just kind of be an insurance lawyer forever. I actually found them kind of interesting, but also convoluted and really annoying. The one thing I will say for everyone that's kind of listening in is, I think there's kind of a situation here that you might want to be aware of, where plaintiffs' attorneys are going to get phone calls right and left. So yay, plaintiffs' attorneys that deal with insurance policies. If you have a policy that you think was probably going to be able to pay out, and for some reason, kind of after all of these events have occurred and they're trying to exclude it now, but you purchased kind of insurance prior to any of this becoming a known cause, is what Caroline's talking about here. Obviously, you cannot purchase insurance at this point and have it covered because it's a known occurrence. It's obviously not unforeseeable anymore. So I think I know some people have policies that they've purchased 6 months ago, a year ago, that probably would have covered this, but they're kind of giving them the role, ring-a-roll, like just trying to figure out how they cannot pay. And if you have a large sum of money that is at stake here, a lot of conference organizers I know in particular have been getting this kind of roll around. And I think that's the point at which you need to go talk to a plaintiff's attorney, because I think there's going to be a lot of lawsuits in the coming year surrounding insurance policies and whether these circumstances, will allow for a policy to be paid out for a certain amount of money.
Now, I have a question for you about that, because I didn't do insurance work, so I don't know how this works. But I know, like with plaintiff's injury attorneys, a lot of times those consults are free. So do you think that there will be do they offer free consults typically for? Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm trying to point people there. Like if you have 10, 20,000 plus or more, like $100,000 on the line, that is a really good case for a plaintiff's attorney. And they are willing and able to sue insurance companies. And they want to do it because you guys, insurance companies have lawyers and insurance companies fight things, but then there's settlements. So
Right.
I just want everyone to know, like there are things out there available to you in these insurance situations. If you have further questions, like you need to contact an attorney, and you are kind of looking for a plaintiff's attorney that, you know, potentially a personal injury attorney is your best bet at this point, sort of. They might be able to point you in the right direction because those personal injury attorneys, you guys are the ones who are battling insurance policies. So that's why I say that's kind of that's your best bet at this point. But I just want you guys to know, like, you're not kind of crap out of luck. You know, I do think there's going to be circumstances where people are going to be fighting insurance companies on this, but they expect that. You guys, that's why insurance companies say, no, you're not covered. Like that's always that in most circumstances, they are always going to say that because 90% of people say okay and they move on, and the 10% of people hire an attorney and then they fight it and then they settle. Like, I'm so sorry. That's just the easiest way to like put it out there. And it's really sad, but that is kind of how it works in the insurance world. I'm going to get off my soapbox here now, but that is how it works. And it's really sad.
No, that's such good information because I've only dealt with insurance companies for like IP payout for IP cases, intellectual property cases, and like paying out for IP coverage. And most of the time they're always like, no. And I just didn't know if that was typical for these kind of cases either. So that's really interesting to know. And I didn't know you worked in insurance. You learn something new every day.
I know. I thought I was just going to do it forever. Hey friends, Paige here. I know this episode has probably your brain spinning and heads rolling and you've got a lot of things going on. But if you are in a situation with a client where you are either canceling their contract or rescheduling their event, and you want to make sure that you document through a written agreement what you guys are going to do moving forward, I highly, highly suggest that you get a cancellation contract in place or a rescheduling contract in place. You want to have things like the scope of the cancellation or the rescheduling. Are they forfeiting the retainer? Are they transferring the retainer? You want to have a release of your contractual obligations, a mutual release of claims, representations and warranties, confidentiality. All of that needs to be in your written termination agreements. And we have those at thelegalpageshop.com. We created these especially for you during this crazy, crazy time. And I want to make sure that you guys have all of these resources at your fingertips. You can get the cancellation contract and the rescheduling contract in a bundle at a discounted rate. Just go to thelegalpageshop.com. I've got you, friend. I'm here for you. Let's kind of end this conversation with like financial position of your business. Okay. Where are you at? Everyone kind of listening in. We've talked about force majeure, where you're at. Are you canceling or rescheduling events? Where are your clients at? What insurance do you have or don't have? But I think at the end of the day, it's like, where are your finances at as a business owner? Caroline, I'm just going to stay here and you can end the conversation with your take on this. I think everyone's really realizing they need a new strategy on how to use retainers and deposits. I'm really encouraging people to treat them like attorneys have to treat them. Mm-hmm. So you guys, we have holding accounts that we can't touch. We cannot transfer any money out of those holding accounts into our business bank account until we have rendered services on whatever amount retainer we took. And I think that is kind of good practice at this point. I think business owners are really freaking out right now, small business owners, because they take the retainers, but then they automatically transfer them into their business bank account, which just a couple days later or whatever, they pay themselves and then it's in their personal account, but they haven't rendered services. And now people are like, I'm going under. But I think, moving forward, people are going to have a very different strategy on taking on retainers and what those look like. What do you think about that?
I think you hit it on the head right there. We have been in such a boom economically for so long. I mean, it's not like the 90s or anything, but like we've been in a very good space for the event industry and for, it's just like, okay, well, if I can make it through to, and I will tell you, as when I started my law practice, like we were very much like going from month to month. Obviously we have we had our ILTA account. So we were, or our trust account. So we paid out money like we were supposed to, but like we were not saving a lot and we were not, it was tough. And so I understand what it's like when you're just like, wow, I really just need a paycheck because I need to pay my rent. So I'm saying this with all the love in my heart and a lot of empathy here, but I think people are starting to realize, like you said, you can't just get paid for retainer and be like, oh, now I have $5,000.
Yeah.
Because you might not. I mean, if we're looking at it, especially the way a lot of event professionals have their contracts set up, which is a 50% retainer, non-refundable retainer up front, and then 50% on the day of. And then if, we go over, then you pay me whatever you go over. That's not a very court judge legal friendly way to actually set up a non-refundable retainer process. I mean, it's technically you want to have kind of like a little bite-sized chunks along the way, which sucks and most people don't want to do because that's representative of the work you're putting in, of the time you're taking off your calendar. The closer you get, the harder it is to rebook. So that kind of situation. And I've talked about that. I talk about that all the time to clients and nobody listens or cares, but I get it. It's fine. So I think people are going to start putting a lot more money away.
Yeah.
Putting stuff in emergency funds, opening business savings account for these kind of times. It's stuff that we preach a lot, but until the event happens, it's very easy when you're in there's always going to be another wedding. There's always going to be another event. There's always going to be X, Y, and Z, to not be worrying about it as much, and not making it a priority because you're just trying to move through, keep up, pay your contractors, all that stuff. So at this point, it could be really a good idea to reach out to your resources in the creative industry that deal with money. Michelle Loretto with Sage Wedding Pros, Amy Northard, she's great. I know Nadia has some stuff over at Nadia Anderson CPA. So it just kind of looking to those people to say like, all right, well, I actually kind of need a plan. So what are these people saying? I'm sure I'm missing a bunch of really, really great people, but running stuff more like a business instead of just like freelancing, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I, of course, want to shout out to my financial friends as well. Caroline hit on a couple that I love. I love Britton the Bee. Brittany's wonderful. And then I also love Dominique Broadway. I know she was on the Honey Book and Rising Tide Society webinar with me this week. And she was really helpful, kind of talking a little bit more about emergency funds and what it's going to look like to get access to kind of these relief funds that are being put in place for small business owners. And then also, I love that she really talked about what you actually should be doing with retainers. So if we're going to have a silver lining on all of this, you guys, I do think it has us take a new look and approach on our financial position as business owners and what we should probably be doing in the future regarding this. Like, you kind of want an emergency fund, of course, for you as from the personal standpoint of your livelihood and, how you run your house and your personal life. But I think your business also kind of needs savings accounts, emergency funds in place, and then probably keep those retainers on hold and don't pay yourself those retainers until your services or the event has been fully completed, potentially, or at least a portion of that. Again, we're not financial gurus here, but we do, legal and financial kind of go together oftentimes. And so we get fielded these questions quite a bit, but we would definitely, if you guys have further questions on this, we can tell you like what financial people we would suggest that you reach out to. And the last thing I just want to say is, you guys, we've talked about documenting everything, but it's really important and vital right now, not only with your clients and communicating with them, but also with your finances. So
yes.
People are like, how am I going to get access to all these relief funds? I know the Small Business Administration is putting together federal funds. I know that there's other types of relief funds getting put into place from different organizations. I know ConvertKit has one. I'm sure all kinds of other organizations are putting these together. I think people are just pooling money too for small business owners. And they are really lending a hand to the financial position that this is going to put people in our economy. But I think it's really wise. And our other attorney friend, Brittany Rattel, really put this at the forefront of everybody's mind. Like, to get access to those, you're going to have to document that you were in a financial hardship. So remember to do that, everybody. Like, it's important to do that. You need to do that. And just don't be willy-nilly with the financial position you're in and the hardship you may be facing. Like, screenshot that, have it in a folder. Like, really, if you're sitting at home and you're trying to think of things to do as a business owner to kind of be a better back-end business owner at this point, I think documentation is probably the first thing you should be doing, making sure you have your ducks in a row. I guess you can have the last word on that.
No, I think that's great. Honestly, Brittany Rattel, like you mentioned, she had a really good post about it. And I second and third that, just document. You should be keeping records, obviously, for taxes. You should be keeping records for just balancing your books anyway. But snap receipts, if you're not doing that, I know it can be really difficult to remember sometimes, but just try to make it more of a priority to snap receipts with your phone, because believe it or not, and I found this out the hard way in my first year of business, but receipts fade over time. They will fade, so they will go away and you won't be able to see the ink anymore. So take pictures of it, because it might take a while for some stuff for things to shake out. So QuickBooks, I know, has the receipt snapping feature. There are apps like Expensify, all that. You can just kind of keep it all nice and kind of put together. You can also, if you are spending money based on this, you're expending extra money, you can make a separate email account. It doesn't have to be an email account. If you don't want to pay for another domain name email account, don't make it on your domain, make it a Gmail account. But you can have it be COVID-19 cjfoxlaw@gmail.com and forward all the, the receipts that you're getting from online stuff. Maybe you have to buy extra stuff online and you don't have a physical receipt. Just forward it all there. And then that way you'll have it organized. Mm-hmm. So that's, I'm on a huge, I can't even think, my words aren't working, but I'm making vanity emails for all of our stuff now because it helps me organize things. So I think that's just another good way to do it.
It's a great approach. And it's good for people to hear these type of things like, oh yeah, I don't just want to, maybe it's just a folder in your regular Gmail account, but still right. Probably organizing this documentation is good practice at this point. So wow, we went through a lot on this episode and I think it was so helpful. You guys, it's always good to have episodes like this where you guys could kind of be flies on the wall of attorneys bouncing back and forth and talking. And I want you all to know that my take as an attorney is very open, approachable. Caroline and I have had really, really good rapport since we've met. I think some attorneys, a lot of people have bad connotations of attorneys where we're super competitive and attorneys don't talk to each other and yada, yada. I don't think that's the case, especially within our kind of online business, virtual law world. Yeah. And I love being able to talk to other attorneys and have people understand that we may run similar businesses, but we still call each other and ask questions. And we got to pretend like we're in an office situation where we can knock on, the attorney's door next to us and kind of talk through things. So I want you all to know that you guys, Caroline is amazing. We both serve clients. We're similar. I like to think of it as photographers. There's hundreds of thousands of photographers out there. And why can't we all just work together and come together as a community instead of constantly competing? And I truly feel that way with attorneys as well. I think open communication and discussing things and having people realize that there are various takes on things. There's various interpretations. That's why lawyers have their own profession. I think that's why I always tell people that's why there's 2 parties in every lawsuit.
Exactly.
Or 2+ parties in every lawsuit. There has to be two differing opinions and arguments, welcome to the legal world. But for the most part, like Carol and I agree on pretty much everything regarding force majeure, cancellation, rescheduling situations. It is fact specific. It is very dependent on where you're at with your clients and your contracts. So you guys, you can reach out to us. Caroline, where can they find you if they have further questions? Or, I know you have all kinds of great resources too, you guys. So make sure you go find her resources. Where can they get those?
Sure, absolutely. You can find me at Engaged Legal on Instagram. That's where we're kind of like the most active. And then we also have engagedlegal.com. We have blogs. I'm actually putting up some more resources as I find them there and updating that. So we'll have some more information there. But I also just want to say, like, you are the best. And like, you kind of make me cry because I'm like, first of all, I'm a huge crier. Anybody that like knows me knows that. But I'm just really grateful to have a friend in the industry because sometimes it's very hard to find that. And I'm really grateful and I'm getting emotional.
Oh, I love you, Caroline. I feel that same way. I think you guys, especially in the legal world, I mean, it is similar to your guys' industries, but it's a little different. I think people are a little more competitive, and it's really good for us to just sit down and talk with one another and feel like we have a friend on our side that's willing to talk through things. And Caroline, I've been so appreciative of your friendship. So you guys, please go find her. Caroline has wonderful resources. Obviously, the Legal Page has resources. You're listening to our podcast right now. But Caroline, it's good to get, if you're going to like really invest into your education and like where you're getting your news and your resources from, lawyers are a great resource. So yep. Go check out her blog. I know she has offered some really good insight on this. I know she's working on crafting things that'll probably launch next week as well. So reach out to her. She's a very, very smart lady, valuable resource. And Caroline, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This was fun to talk through, even though it's not a super fun time. I think it's helpful for people to listen into this.
No, this is great. I'm so grateful that we were able to talk through this. And honestly, I mean, I even have better ideas just from like shooting and spitballing around like this. So thank you. I appreciate you so much. And I'm glad that I have you to talk to.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legal Page podcast. See, I told you being legally legit isn't so scary. Be sure to visit thelegalpage.com for all show notes. And it would be super awesome if you could head over to iTunes and leave a review. Last but not least, don't forget to join my free Facebook group for unlimited legal and biz Q&A. Chat soon, Legal Pagers.